Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Quantum Action, the podcast that's here to take you to infinity and beyond. Today, I have a special guest with us. We have Mark Safer with us. He's the author of this book about Nikola Tesla and a new book as well, which he has just sitting next to him. He's the #1 expert in the world about Nikola Tesla. So lots of information. We're going to be talking about Tesla today and other things and technology and that. Mark, welcome to the show. And can you tell us a bit about how you got into learning about Tesla and becoming the expert on Tesla and writing these 2 books about Mr. Nikola Tesla? Over to you, Mark.
Yes, thanks, and thanks for having me. My story begins really in 1976. I was teaching courses in parapsychology and writing different articles for my friend Howard Smuckler, who was the editor of Ancient Astronauts and also ESP magazine. And in writing these articles, I came across a story about a man supposedly born from another planet who had given us remote control, wireless communication, the induction motor, the hydroelectric power system, fluorescent and neon lights, robotics, the basis of what became cell phone technology, and on and on. And I'm thinking, I'm already in a crazy world of parapsychology, ESP, and all that stuff, out-of-body experiences, telepathy, psychokinesis. So, but this story is completely crazy, because if this guy had ever lived, I would have known about him. So I was in the New York Public Library, and I found an article written by Nikola Tesla from the turn of the century, about 1900, on high-frequency phenomena. And so when I came back to Rhode Island, where I was teaching parapsychology at Providence College, Howard said, "Oh, Tesla, here," and he gave me the first major biography on him, called Prodigal Genius by John O'Neill, who knew Tesla for 40 years, and another crazy book about Tesla living in a UFO flying around, and he was still alive, like 120 years old. So those are the 2 books that I had to start with. And then I got a book of his patents, lectures and articles, which was this thick, was 1,000 pages. And it had patents in them, had his solid patents. And I said, I'm in this far out field of parapsychology and ESP. You don't know where reality ends and fantasy begins. But with Tesla, I've got the actual patents. So I went into the heart and soul of each one of his patents to find out if he really was the inventor of the hydroelectric power system, induction motor, wireless communication, and all that. And that's what led to the book you have in your hands, Wizard, The Life and Times of Nikola Tesla. That's really how I got into this story.
Yeah, so now he's got all these patents, and you also shot a documentary called The Tesla Files, which I encourage any of you that's watching or listening to go and have a look. You can watch it on Amazon. And yeah, that was very, very interesting, where you actually took some of these patents and you replicated the experiments, and you proved that, the experiments that Tesla talked about actually did work. Can you tell us a bit about those experiments and what came about from that?
Yes, Prometheus Films hired me to help write the story. They used my book as a major source of it and star in this story. And there were 2 other fellows involved.
Mm-hmm.
One was Jason Stapleton, who was an ex-Army guy. And the
Mm-hmm.
other guy, Dr. Travis Taylor, is a guy with 2 PhDs. I have 1 PhD. I know how long it takes to get 1 PhD. He had 2 PhDs in physics.
Mm-hmm.
And we discussed various experiments. Let's see what we can do. So we sent him out to Colorado Springs. And what he did was he got one gigantic Tesla coil and then another gigantic Tesla coil, and they're separated by 50 feet or 100 feet or thereabouts. And what Tesla said was that, we think of radio broadcast. You have the tower, and then it goes out through the airwaves.
Mm-hmm.
When I was a kid, I had what was known as a crystal radio set. And the crystal radio set has no plug. It has earphones like this, and it has literally a crystal
Mm-hmm.
and wires and a couple other things to pick up the information. And my father was a television repairman, and he'd stuck the aerial out the window, and we were on the 2nd floor, and it didn't work. And my father's pacing the room, and he's going, "I don't understand this." He says, "Oh yeah, we need a ground connection." So we attached another wire to the radiator, which was linked to the ground. And I picked up all the radio stations. I'm old enough to remember Muhammad Ali's first boxing matches. I listened to the Sonny Liston Muhammad Ali boxing match on my crystal radio set. It was getting the energy through the earth mostly from the local radio station. So I knew the earth was important. So what Tesla was saying is that the radio has evolved uh, with the idea of sending it through the airwaves. But that's not really what the best way to do it was. He said sending it through the earth. So that's what we wanted to test. And what he said was his giant towers were in resonant frequencies with each other. They could act as transmitters or receivers. So what Travis did was he had one giant Tesla coil, and we stuck into the ground, and then another giant Tesla coil 50 feet away,
Mm-hmm.
and attached to that was a light bulb. And when he charged up the first Tesla coil, the energy was sent through the earth, picked up by the other Tesla coil, and he stuck the light bulb into the ground, and the light bulb went on. When he took it off, the light bulb went off. When he took it back, it went on. So we were able to establish that that theory was correct. We then took it one step further because he said it could also operate machinery.
Mm-hmm.
So we attached the second Tesla coil to a remote control. Well, it was a boat. It was supposed to be remote control, but it was over a weekend. We didn't have the time to do that. So it was attached by wires to the second Tesla coil. But in fact, that boat worked. So he sent energy from one Tesla coil through the earth to the other Tesla coil. And from that other Tesla coil, it was connected by wires to a boat, which went all around that little pond. And so we really established that Tesla's idea of sending energy through the earth was viable. And that was the most important experiments that we did during the show.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Also, in the book, you mentioned that Tesla actually invented the cell phone back in 1905, I think it was. So a lot of what he came up with, a lot of these patents, is technology that kind of is only coming to fruition now. But a lot of it back in the day, because of the whole story with J.P. Morgan and Edison and whatever, it seems like they were trying to conspire against Tesla to stop his inventions from coming out. And those people that were so-called conspiring against him were the ones that went on to make a lot of money. So, I mean, is that the case? Do you think that there was a conspiracy against Mr. Tesla or not?
Unfortunately, the answer is yes. What happened was Tesla had a wireless system and he was racing against Marconi. And again, what I said was that Tesla was trying to send it through the earth mostly, whereas Marconi was sending it through the air. But one of the key differences between Marconi and Tesla, right now, I've been arguing with this guy from the IEEE, and you shake your head because he's insisting that Marconi's the inventor of the radio. He just isn't.
Mm-hmm.
Marconi deserves all the credit for bringing radio to the world. Tesla did not do that. Marconi did it, and he
Mm-hmm.
deserves that kind of credit.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter was, in the turn of the century, 1900, 1901, 1902, all Marconi could do would be to transmit Morse code, dots and dashes,
Mm-hmm.
along one frequency. He didn't even know what frequency he was using in 1901. Tesla, on the other hand, uh, is the inventor of continuous wave frequencies. So what we call Hertzian waves are actually Tesla waves. So the basis of radio and television and cell phone technology is Tesla's continuous wave frequencies. So that's what he wanted to do, but it was a lot more expensive. And Morgan had given him $150,000, which in those days, I think you got to multiply it easily by 10 or 20,
And
million and a half,
yeah.
10 million. It was a lot of money. And Tesla ran out of money and he needed more money. And he had built a larger tower than they had agreed upon. So he had essentially breached his contract. And Morgan was responsible for a stock market crash at the same time. So all those factors played into it. And Tesla was trying to say, I have the ability to create an unlimited number of wireless channels, which is what we're calling cell phone technology. I have the ability. You're in England right now. I'm
Yeah.
in Rhode Island near New York right now, across
Mm-hmm.
the Atlantic, and it's like we're sitting across the room from each other. And
Yeah.
that's exactly what Tesla was telling Morgan in 1900. He was
Yeah.
saying it'd be like from here to Australia, we'll be sitting in the same room. I know I built a larger tower than we agreed upon, but give me the money to finish it. And Morgan said, no, I said I was going to give you 150,000. That's it. And I'm a man of my word, and I'm not going to give any more. So when Tesla went to Henry Clay Frick, who Morgan had given $60 million to when U.S. Steel was created, or Jacob Schiff, who was worth a couple hundred million, or
Hmm.
Thomas Fortune Ryan, who was worth a couple hundred million,
Hmm.
they all meet with Morgan.
Yeah.
And and Morgan prevents them from giving Tesla the money. Now the question is why? You're
Yeah,
asking about
that's what I was.
conspiracy.
Yeah, because that's what I was thinking. Because I mean, it's just crazy that they would stop humankind from progressing. I mean, I took off from Paris Charles de Gaulle Airport an hour and a half before Concorde crashed from the same runway. And when I got to Milan, I was flying to Milan. They told me, "Oh, Concorde crashed," but it didn't actually crash. It hit debris on the runway, and then as a result of that, they decided that Concorde was dangerous. But there was nothing dangerous about Concorde. I mean, anything that's going to smash into a piece of thing on a runway is going to blow up. And since Concorde was retired, we haven't got supersonic civilian air travel. So everything is accelerated, but air travel has been slowed down. It seems like back in the day of Nikola Tesla, that Nikola Tesla's inventions were going to accelerate mankind technology wise. And it seems like these people kind of put a stop to it. Why do you think that happened?
I think there's a number of reasons. One of the reasons was Morgan had rubber plantations. He had in Africa. He had copper mines out west. He had lumber yards in Alaska. He's making money with rubber, copper, lumber.
Hmm.
Tesla threatened all of that with
Yeah.
removing wires.
Hmm.
Plus, there was a problem. How do you bill something? We make a cell phone call. How does AT&T or Verizon, whoever, how do they know that you made a call? Today we have computers, but in those days, at the turn of the century, it was a lot harder to envision how they would know. And what
Yeah.
Tesla was saying was the money will come in a different way. I
Hmm.
like to watch football. And
Hmm.
these football players, there's a lineman getting $60 million a year. $60 million a year is a lineman. He's
Yeah.
not even the quarterback.
Yeah.
So where does the money come from? It comes from advertising
Hmm.
and the sale of equipment. So Tesla knew that we were in a new paradigm. He's trying to tell Morgan, this is a whole different paradigm. Money's going to come in an entirely different way. Morgan couldn't understand that. But when you mention conspiracies, what's also very important here is that Morgan forced Tesla to attach his lighting patents. Tesla's the inventor of fluorescent lighting.
Hmm.
We all know what it's like to change a light bulb. You used to burn your fingers when you
Hmm.
change a light bulb. It's called built-in obsolescence. Light bulbs were made to last 8 months, a year if you're lucky. I would have my fluorescent light on over the sink for 8, 10 years, and then never turned it off. Just leave it on.
Yeah.
That's what Tesla invented. So the Morgan people, they prevented fluorescent lighting from coming into being until the 1940s, when the demand for lighting was so urgent that they had to then put fluorescent lighting in. And then after that, every single giant building would have fluorescent lights in the
Yeah.
roofs,
Yeah.
the ceiling, because you couldn't waste all that time, that energy and heat. So those are two instances where Tesla was definitely thwarted by the money men.
Yeah. And of course, those men went on to create the Federal Reserve. And then they went on to take the US dollar off the gold standard and then create fractional banking, and just basically increase the money supply, which obviously then helps them to control the world. So I guess that's what they were getting to. Um, is my assumption there correct?
Well, you're taking it to a whole nother level. I'm
Yeah,
looking
yeah,
at,
yeah. And we don't want to
I,
go
I,
down there because we want to stay focused on technology, but I can see I can kind of see and connect the dots.
yeah, well, just fluorescent lighting alone. I mean, look at and LEDs now replaces it, but keeping fluorescent lighting off the market for 40 years for built-in obsolescence. You mentioned inferior technology, though. I mean, look at Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. The Bill Gates IBM compatible computer was inferior, greatly inferior to Stephen Jobs' computer. And
Yeah,
Jobs almost went, he was kicked out of his own company.
yeah,
The company almost went under.
yeah,
And it was basically almost a miracle that he got back into his company, and now the Apple computer is such an important computer. But
yeah.
Bill Gates knew that he had an inferior disk operating system, but he continued on anyway because it was too successful. And I think it's similar in that regard, that Morgan was making money with wires. Why take a chance, on a wireless system?
Yeah, but today we have a Mr. Elon Musk, which owns the Tesla motor cars, and a lot of people think that he invented the Tesla motor car company, but he didn't. He actually was an early investor, as it's explained in your documentary. But it seems like what Elon Musk is doing is putting a lot more attention towards Nikola Tesla by calling his cars Tesla. Is that has there been an increase in interest in Nikola Tesla's work? And I hope there is, because that's a good thing.
Yes, there is, and my books, particularly the first book, is selling more now than ever before. It was just number one, literally, on Amazon this week. In its various subcategories.
Yeah.
And I think one of the main reasons is Elon Musk. Elon Musk basically is the Tesla of today. I mean, he's a
Yeah.
genius. He's
Yeah.
got his problems. You can criticize him for various things, but
Yeah.
God, SpaceX, what he
Yeah.
has done is truly incredible.
Yeah. So tell us about your next book, the one that you have there sitting next to you. Because Tesla, he invented many things, but also there's a number of weapons that he came up with, some of them which are quite dangerous. Tell us a bit about, this second book, and why you decided to write a second book.
Well, I was already in the process of writing the second book when Hollywood called me and said, "You want to star in this television show?" And then they flew me out to Hollywood and then flew
Yeah.
me out to Serbia and all of that.
Hmm.
And we had to, the idea behind the Tesla files was that there are secret papers. After Tesla died, the military kept hold of his papers for 10 years before they gave it over to Serbia.
Hmm.
And what I wanted to understand is, why did they keep those papers? And what were the top secret papers in there? One of them was a particle beam weapon. Another became the Osprey helicopter airplane, which is a $70 million airplane.
Now I'm
If
familiar
you
with that.
go into the history of
B-22.
the
Yeah.
airplane,
Yeah.
you go into history of Lockheed Martin or Bell Labs,
Yeah.
you'd be darn lucky to find Tesla's name. But Tesla actually had a patent on a plane that took off like a helicopter and rotated into the airplane position. So
Mhm.
there's a clear example where they hid his contribution to a very important military
Yeah.
uh, plane. So what was happening to me was, because the Tesla files went out to 40 different countries, people literally from all over the world were sending me information.
Mhm.
I got declassified documents from the Soviet Union,
Oh, wow.
which established that Joseph Stalin himself had to okay the purchase of Tesla's particle beam weapon. So that plays a big role in here. And so what I was trying to do was to understand what happened to his papers after he died. That was a big part of this story. And so what I did was I placed myself back in that day. And you're in England. And in the 1930s, Tesla was very concerned that the Germans would invade England. And he writes to the British War Office. And I got all the letters between Tesla and the British War Office.
Mhm.
And one of the generals in the British War Office says, yeah, well, let's ask General McNaughton. And then it goes on and on and on. And I'm reading, page after page after page. But in my head, I'm going, General McNaughton, who the heck is General McNaughton? I never heard of this guy. So I do some research, and he's on the cover of Time magazine. He's on the cover of Life magazine. He's third in line to head Allied forces after Eisenhower and Mountbatten. He's the head of secret weapons development for the uh, Canadian government, and you see photographs of McNaughton sitting next to Winston Churchill going over maps. So essentially, he was the head of secret weapons development for the Canadian government and for the British Empire. He's flying into Washington, D.C. to meet with Franklin Roosevelt and with Vannevar Bush, who's head of the Manhattan Project and secret weapons development for the United States. And
Mhm.
he's writing letters back and forth with Tesla, trying to understand Tesla's particle beam weapon, sending uh, physicists down to the Hotel New Yorker to meet with him.
Mhm.
So what I did was I went back in time to the 1940s, and I started to get the timing. And so, uh,
So, Mark, what you're telling us here is something that should be taught. I should have learned about this when I was in high school, but it wasn't in the history books. You're unraveling this information now. Incredible. Continue.
yeah, it's just an incredible story. 2 weeks before Franklin Roosevelt, we have the documents where Roosevelt says, "I want to get the lowdown on Nikola Tesla." He wants to meet with Tesla to understand his particle beam weapon. Two
Yeah.
weeks before that, Vannevar Bush comes into the Oval Office and says to President Roosevelt, "We think the Germans are going to be able to build an atom bomb in 2 years, and it's going to take us 3 years." 2 weeks later, he says, I got to meet with Tesla." So what I'm finding is the idea of Tesla, this old man who's withering away, that's poor and feeding pigeons in the park, and no one ever heard of him anymore, isn't the real story. The real story is he's negotiating with Joseph Stalin. He's negotiating with General Andrew McNaughton, who's
Mhm.
third in line to head Allied forces. He's negotiating with President Roosevelt and his minions and people from the War Office. He's in the game right to the very end of his life. And that's, a lot of what the latter part of this book deals with.
Yeah. Also, in your book, you talk about these 80 trunks full of Tesla documents about his inventions and that. And then when you went to Serbia to the Tesla Museum, there were only like 40 or 60 trunks, and there was like 20 missing. But then you discovered there were 120 trunks, but there's still a number of trunks missing. Have you managed to find out where those trunks went?
Well, what I think is, I think they condensed the trunks. So it's really not the trunk so
Okay.
much, it's more the papers.
Okay. So they
Um,
took stuff out of a trunk and put it in another one. Yeah.
but what's important to me is that I wrote to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base using the Freedom of Information Act, and they
Mhm.
said, we don't have anything on Tesla. I got a dozen letters with about Tesla's particle beam weapon from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and they're telling me they don't have anything. So there's still secret stuff about Tesla. The particle beam weapon has evolved into something called a railgun. It's a lot less expensive than many other weapons, and it's a good way. I mean, Putin's right now threatening us with some super. You talk about supersonic.
Yeah.
Uh, they can do Mach 7 or Mach 8
Yeah. Hypersonic
uh,
missiles. Yeah. Yeah.
and deliver a bomb. We're going to need Tesla's particle beam weapon or the railgun or some similar laser thing to immediately shoot out. The Israelis have the Iron Dome kind of a
Yeah.
concept of shooting out. So
Yeah.
his technology is very important. And what I get into here is all the details of what he was explaining about this. What they did was, I really think that President Roosevelt had two choices. I could either try to build an atom bomb or I could try to build Tesla's particle beam weapon. He put
Okay.
all his efforts into the atom bomb, which I think was the right decision.
Okay.
But there's big secrets still left about his other weapon. I think we need it when we got it. These the threat of people like Putin, who's
Yeah.
who keeps threatening these horrible things. That we need this kind of technology, unfortunately, and that's a lot of some of the things that's going on in Tesla. Was it at war?
Yeah. So in the beginning of our chat today, you mentioned that you read this book about, and you even say that in your book that Tesla was born on a spaceship, and he was brought down to Earth and given to these, husband and wife, and they adopted him. And then at a certain point, he developed this technology to communicate with the stars. Now, how much truth is there in that story, or is that just the makings of somebody that decided to concoct up this story? But I mean, if we look at what he did, you thought, well, this guy was super intelligent. It could be that this intelligence came from outer space. I mean, what have you discovered as you've delved into the life of Tesla?
Well, what happened in the late 1940s and early 50s, there were a lot of UFO sightings,
Yeah,
and
1947.
this
Yeah, the first big sighting. Yeah.
and one of the ladies who was involved in UFOs was Margaret Storm, and she wrote a book called Return of the Dove. And in
Mhm.
that book, she hypothesizes that Tesla was born on another planet, came to the Earth to give us all these inventions.
Mhm.
That book was morphed into The Man Who Fell to Earth, starring David Bowie, where you have a Martian landing on the Earth.
Mhm.
And that's why David Bowie later, in 1976, he made The Man Who Fell to Earth. In the early 2000s, he made The Prestige, which he actually plays Tesla, and that's
Yeah.
that's the reason. So there's the myth that he was born from another planet. But where it gets real is that Tesla received pulse frequencies from outer space, and he assumed that they came from Mars. And in those days, there was a lot of belief in life on Mars. Even today, right now, you can read articles where they're speculating maybe there's life on Mars. But
Yeah,
the idea,
if there is life, they're probably microbes. I don't see them as humanoid like us. I mean, probably they thought Mars because it's the closest planet, but now we know there's so many other exoplanets out there. Maybe it's from someplace near Proxima Centauri or some other star system. Who knows?
yeah, but the idea is that there's life elsewhere and it's
Yeah, yeah,
intelligent life.
exactly. Yeah, yeah,
In those days, they thought that they were irrigating the whole planet.
yeah.
And Percival Lowell had a huge telescope.
Hmm.
His brother was the president of Harvard University, and he was saying these are the canals of Mars. The Martians are irrigating the whole planet. And Tesla felt if they're going to contact anybody, they're going to contact me because I'm the most advanced technician, electrical
Yeah.
genius out there. And so he had a bit of an ego.
Yeah.
And so he wrote an article called Talking with the Planets.
Mhm.
Uh, and he believed in what's called the plurality of worlds, that there must be intelligent life elsewhere in the universe. And so he got attached to occult situations. That's why I came across his name, because he had disappeared. He had been buried into the occult. And so that there's the myth of that he's in Martian and all of that, but the reality is that he really did believe in life on other planets, and and that he felt that there were ways to contact these other individuals that are out there. I think a lot of it has to do with hyperspace. We have to be able to transcend the speed of light to communicate with other beings. I mean, that would be my guess.
Yeah, I mean, I've always thought, I mean, as a pilot, we have a speed limit of 250 knots under 10,000 feet. And the reason being is if you hit something faster than 250 knots, because the formula for force is half times mv squared, so speed squared, the impact is of the speed of whatever is more important than the mass. So when I was flying jets and things like that, and we've got this speed limit, I then thought to myself, okay, if people go to space and they're flying at 20,000 miles an hour, you only have to hit something that small, and it's going to create a big dent, if not destroy the whole spaceship. So how are we supposed to fly from here to the moon, or here to Mars, or here and beyond, not knowing that we could hit something? Plus, consider the fact that for a human being to be in space for a long time is not going to be easy. And one thing is being in orbit on the space station. And I've spoken to a number of astronauts that have been on the space station. One guy I spoke to has been up there for about a year. And already that is a bit disorienting for a human being. But you imagine launching them out to Mars, where after a month and a half into the journey, there's no going back, and you're shutting this aluminium tube with another 8 people. How is that going to affect people psychologically? So I'm thinking to myself, well, maybe space travel is more like Stargate, where you walk through a portal and you end up somewhere else, and it's instant. Maybe that's the way we're meant to travel. And maybe Tesla was into that too, when he said he was communicating with other worlds. I mean, any information on that? What are your thoughts on that theory?
Well, I think it's all very interesting, and there have been UFO sightings which the American government has already agreed that they don't know what these things are.
Yeah.
Um, One of the things which is not directly related, but indirectly related, which I get in the end of the book, is something called Tesla's dynamic theory of gravity. And it has to do with the fundamental structure of space. And essentially, what he was saying was, I never understood what gravity was. I thought we were attracted to the Earth. But what Tesla is saying is that all matter is absorbing energy all of the time. So the Earth has a tremendous need to absorb energy. And when you jump up, the reason you fall back down is because you're in the way of the influx of this energy. And it has a direct link to Einstein's theory, E equals mc squared. There's all of this linkage.
Mhm.
And part of it has to do with the tachyonic realm. One idea is that the ether, which we are absorbing, lives in a faster than the speed of light realm. And so this is linked to hyperspace, which is what you're getting to. What I'm trying to say is some of the understanding of Tesla's dynamic theory of gravity will give us more information about the fundamental structure of space, which may enable us to one way or another tunnel through space. Maybe we can't physically do it, but maybe we can send impulses faster than the speed of light and contact other beings from other galaxies that way. Or maybe there really is a way to jump into, but it all has to do with understanding the fundamental structure of space. And Tesla's dynamic theory of gravity is one of the stepping stones towards understanding some of these mysteries.
So do you think someone like Elon Musk, which obviously is probably big into Tesla, do you think he's got some of his SpaceX scientists working at this kind of stuff?
I would think so. I would think that any intelligent person that studied all this realizes that the speed of light is is a threshold, and that threshold can be exceeded.
It's like the sound barrier, the whole story of Chuck Yeager. And that's an interesting one. Some certain people believe you couldn't fly faster than the speed of sound. And all these test pilots were trying to, and they're all dying and that. And then, he just decided to pilot the airplane in a different way. So when the airplane did that, instead of pulling back on the stick, he pushed, and that's when the airplane went past the sound barrier. And now we suddenly can fly faster than sound. So probably this whole light speed of light is the same thing. As you said, it's a barrier, but we can get past it.
Yeah, well, I look at, for instance, the Milky Way.
Mm-hmm.
Light travels at 186,000 miles a second.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so from here to the moon is 240,000 miles. So a second and a half, a light will travel from here. It takes 9 minutes for the sun, the light from the sun, to reach the Earth. But the galaxy, it takes 100,000 years traveling at 186,000 miles a second for light to go from one end of the galaxy to the other end. But we can see the galaxy is one thing. The
Mm-hmm.
galaxy is one thing.
Mm-hmm.
So one side of the galaxy must be connected to the other side of the galaxy in some gestalt way. So I think that it's actually c cubed when I did some of the calculations. C
Yeah.
cubed would be a way to get from one end to the other instantaneously. So I think c squared c is one. The speed of light is one
Yeah.
threshold. C squared is another dimension threshold, and then c cubed would be another one. And we got to figure out how to get to the c cubed realm to be able to get to travel anywhere from one end of the galaxy to the other instantaneously. Maybe not physically, but sending impulses through hyperspace that way. So all of that is touched on in the end of my book. But it's all fascinating, just so
Yeah.
fascinating
And the other
things that
thing is,
Tesla leads the way to.
so Mark, what would the world be like today if we had cell phone technology back in 1905, and Tesla had been allowed to develop that, and then been allowed, when he did the experiment with the Walden Tower, to send out electricity for free to everybody? The last 100+ years since then, how would we be living today if Tesla had been allowed to let his technologies become mainstream back then?
I really believe that
What
Hitler
would
would
it
have never been able to have built his Holocaust. I think if we had had a mass communication system,
be? Mhm.
uh, uh, look at all the droves of Russians leaving Russia right now
Yeah,
because they're looking on the internet saying, "I don't want to die, and I
yeah,
don't want to kill Ukrainians. I want to get the heck out of there."
yeah,
So mass communication changes everything, and I
yes.
think that mass communication would have made World War II a lot more difficult to have happened,
Mhm.
and would have brought all the world, the peoples of the world together. That's what Tesla wanted. He talked about utopia, and he said one utopia is our postage system. And
Yeah,
that's how he thinks. That you can send him a letter to any place in the world, and it's okay to do that. And so he's thinking, how can we get all the peoples of the world together? And my mass communication will do that. Morgan, give me the money to complete this. I'm going to bring the world together. I'm going to advance the world a century. So we would have a lot of this. I don't think he really could have envisioned the internet, but it's similar to the idea of the internet.
yeah, of course.
He says in 1904, give me the money, Morgan, and I will convert the brain of the earth into a brain, as it were, which will feel in all its parts. I get chills just even saying that. I mean,
Mhm.
who thinks like that? The guy was a genius. He was thinking of a global community, and I think we would have had a global community a lot in a lot faster rate had Morgan simply given him the other hundred
So do
thousand a
you
year.
think then he could have been an alien?
Well, one of the points
Or
of
he was talking to aliens that were giving him information?
well, I think one of the points of Return of the Dove is she talks about the sixth root race. Yeah, I
Mhm.
went to high school. I was in honors class. There was a double honors class. Those guys were smart. Then girls, they were smarter than me. I know they were smarter than me.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And I think there's a hierarchy of intelligence. I believe that everyone is very intelligent because everyone can drive a car, and we take that for granted. But
Mhm.
it's very complicated to drive a car. And I've taught, for 40 years, I've taught very complex ideas to all different people. So I think we're all highly intelligent, but some people are really brighter than others. And so the idea is that Tess was part of the sixth root race. He was on the next level, and there
Mhm.
were kids. And I think obviously Elon Musk. I
Yeah.
mean, who comes up with the idea that after the rocket ship leaves, the other part I can land on a barge and save the other part. I mean, just pure brilliance. So I think that. So in that sense, I wouldn't say he's an alien, but I think he was touched by God, or touched by some higher spiritual force was playing a role
Well,
in.
as you touch on that, Mark, I think as a race right now, we're not mature enough to be able to go out to other planets. We're just too rogue. I mean, look what happened back in Tesla's time. They suppressed the information that he came up with because they wanted to make money. They wanted power. So you imagine if you was to allow these people to go to other planets to try and convert everybody to their way of doing and try and capitalize on whatever technology they have. I mean, I think we need to, as a species, as earthlings, we need to evolve spiritually and be a bit more mature and a bit more in tune with each other before we're allowed to. I mean, look at some of the things that are happening on earth now. I mean, morality and all these sort of things, families being disrupted, men marrying men, women marrying women, and children coming into families with, and it's all kind of being mixed up at the moment. And I think we need to get back on track. And maybe God has his way of revealing technology and that when we're ready. But right now, I don't think we're ready to go to another planet and visit with another species, unless they're a lot more advanced than us and can kind of, hey, don't make that step or we'll zap you kind of thing.
Well, I think part of it, as I was a kid growing up, my hero was Jacques Cousteau,
Yeah.
because here was a guy who wanted to study nature, but use the highest technology to study nature. And what Tesla did was he invented the hydroelectric power system. He was able, from one falls, Niagara Falls, to electrify the entire Northeast, to send electrical power to Boston, New York, Chicago, Philadelphia. And it's pollution free, does not pollute the air, and does not sap the earth of oil or coal. It runs on a waterfall. He said running on the wheelwork of nature. And I think that whole idea, what always got me about the people that disagree with Al Gore and climate change and all that,
Mhm.
I didn't care whether Al Gore was right or not, because either way, we shouldn't pollute the earth, which is all Gore was basically saying.
Yeah.
And so the next step for us, I think, is to follow in that kind of ideal of running on the real work of nature, of not sapping the earth of oil and coal. The rocket ships that we're sending up, I think, is a primitive way to get to the moon, to use this huge amount of fuel to get up there. We should be
Well,
able to do
you
that.
familiar with Victor Schauberger? He was
Uh,
he lived 1885 to 1958. He was an Austrian philosopher and inventor, and he invented some of the things that he invented. He did by watching nature, and one of the things was how can a trout swim upstream?
wow.
And he was going through this vortex because the trout knew about the vortex, and so he came up with all this kind of thing. And they say he built a flying saucer for Hitler. But he was another one of these people that created inventions by observing nature, a bit like Nikola Tesla.
Yeah, well, look at flight. I mean, you're an
Yeah.
example, but to me, it's a miracle. Our ability to have an airplane go up into the sky is miraculous. And then just watching birds or hummingbirds or the dragonflies or any of the animals that fly, so it's learning from nature. I totally agree. Uh, and Tesla talks a lot about that. He studied Faust and Goethe's ideas of learning from nature, that all the secrets, the cure for cancer, all that stuff is learning from nature.
Yeah, and talking about cures, you mentioned that you're writing a new book about ozone therapy, which is something that Nikola Tesla came up with back in the day, and that kind of therapy would cure viruses.
Yeah,
And
it's right up here, the cover anyway. Uh,
okay, so it's getting ready to be published then.
yes, it'll be published in March. And the reason I learned about this was because of Tesla.
Yeah.
I was speaking at a Tesla conference in 1984, and there was a medical doctor, um, Dr. Freebot, and he said a man was dying of cancer. His body was riddled with tumors, and I gave him ozone therapy, and the tumors were shed, and he was cured. I'm going, wow. And so jump ahead 35 years to the COVID
Mhm.
fiasco. And I said, let me think about this Freebot guy. So I Google his name, and out pops a book called The Story of Ozone by Saul Pressman, written by 12 medical doctors.
Mhm.
And they're all saying that ozone will kill viruses. So
Mhm.
then I got in touch with several medical doctors who are ozone therapists. And I found out that the FDA and the World Health Organization were blocking uh, ozone therapy. They were just blocking it. And it is my total belief that had they not blocked it, we would have never had this pandemic because ozone kills viruses. So I went into the history of ozone therapy, and Tesla was selling ozone therapy equipment back in the turn of the century. He's inventor. He patented an ozone generator. So
Mhm.
Tesla has led me, into so many incredible worlds. I think it's so important to study highly intelligent people like that
Yeah.
and study Elon Musk,
Yeah.
Leonardo da Vinci, uh, because it stimulates your brain, stimulates you
I
to get
mean,
to the next
Mark,
level.
what other inventions did Tesla come up with that we haven't, that we don't know about yet, or maybe you know about that hasn't been sort of.
Well, he had so many inventions, but one of the areas that's still a mystery to me that I haven't totally solved, he said that he could harness cosmic rays.
Okay.
And cosmic rays travel from other galaxies
Yeah.
to get here.
Yeah.
So there was another way to draw energy from the atmosphere that we have yet to truly understand. He also had a rainmaking device. He was trying to study how to create rain.
Yeah.
This hurricane that has just devastated Florida,
Mhm.
I believe that there's a way to rejigger uh, the jet stream. And if we could
Oh no, but that's been
somehow,
going on for a while, because back about 25, 30 years ago, I was flying a Cessna Citation business jet out of Treviso in Italy, and there were these American guys flying this Learjet, and they were going in and testing these weather modification systems. So there were these military aircraft that were jettisoning stuff into the atmosphere, and this Learjet's supposed to fly in there and see if these storms were being created effectively. And this was back 25, 30 years ago. So the weather modification technology has been out there for quite a while, and they have been using it. And I know that for a fact because I spoke to these guys, because we were sitting next to each other at the FBO before we were fueling our airplanes, and they were parked next to mine. So this has been around for a while.
yeah, Tesla has the last article I have in the book. He has a baby on a scale,
Mhm.
and the baby is here, and all of man's creations are here. The baby's brain, one baby's brain, is worth more than every invention that man has ever created. That it's all here, and so I think that there would be a way to change the jet stream, and so we could get a giant hurricane like that to go out to sea rather than to destroy so much. That's the way he's thinking. So I think that's one of his inventions was
Mhm.
weather modification. He also wanted a way to light up the oceans so that the ocean liners could travel in light, which
Oh,
is such a
yeah.
pretty wild
Possibly.
idea
Yeah,
as
yeah,
well.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, he's a fascinating individual, and it's nice to see someone like Elon Musk too that's embracing this type of technology, and he's got the guts to spend his money and go out there and try stuff like he's been doing with SpaceX and Tesla motor cars and other things. I just hope that these people that have these inventions will use them for the betterment of mankind, and not for them to make more money or gain more power. I think that's really the important thing, and I do hope a lot of young people these days, are young inventors, and that are looking into Tesla. Um, Now, Mark, if a young person's watching this now or listening to this, and they want to get into developing some of Tesla's technologies, what's the best move forward for them?
Well, I would get a book of his patents. I mean, that's one way to do it. Um, and I think study math, study electrical engineering. It's very interesting about Nobel. There's no Nobel Prize, for math.
Hmm.
And the reason is that Nobel's wife was having an affair with this mathematician. So
Oh,
he created a Nobel Prize in economics instead. And economics to me never made much sense. I never understood buying and selling money. But
yeah,
I think it's important for kids to do the hard things. I would give kids brain teasers, and they go out
yeah,
into the hallway and see which group, group of 5 different kids, which ones did. Some of them give up, but don't give up. Fight, do that, play chess. Uh, Test your mind. Look at the nature shows. So that's what I would say for the kids of the future. I love there's a movie about robots where the fighting robots.
yeah,
That kind of thing is so great. Let's fight that way. You build a better robot than me. That's the way we're going to compete. And sports is of course another way, the Olympics.
yeah.
So I think it's important to study science. I also want to I'm a handwriting expert.
Hmm.
I want to bring back the Palmer method. I don't know what's happening in England, but they have gotten rid of learning how to do cursive handwriting in the United States, and that's stupid. It's plain
I,
stupid.
I back in school, I learned to write in italics. And that was I had this special fountain pen with a it was a flat point. It wasn't pointed, it was flat. And that way we had a teacher who taught us handwriting. So I learned to write with an italic pen, but that was back, a few years ago. But yeah, now everybody types on a computer.
Yeah, but it trains the brain. What they don't understand is that when we learned how to go from printing to cursive, we're actually redeveloping our brain like learning a musical instrument. You learned how to fly a plane. I mean, that's,
I was 17
incredible.
when I learned to fly. So I was a kid. I was one of the youngest pilots in the world. I got my license at just 17 and 3 months. I was already flying a small Cessna, nothing big or major. But yeah, you can learn anything these days, and because we've got these cell phones, we've got internet, it connects people like we're connecting right now across the ocean, and then sharing this across the world through various social media channels and getting this information out there. People can buy your books to learn more about Nikola Tesla, as you said, get hold of the patents, learn science and maths, and let's develop this technology. Let's take what Nikola Tesla came up with and build on top of that to make the world a better place.
Yes, I completely agree. Totally.
Yeah. Mark, thank you very much for being on the show. I'll post the links below so people can find you and buy your books and study this incredible man, which was Nikola Tesla, and help to, build a better future for everybody here. There's a lot of doom and gloom in the news these days, but I'm an optimist. I believe that mankind is going to do good things for the future. I mean, yes, there's some bad guys out there, but I think at the end of the day, the good guys are going to win, and we need help. And I think Nikola Tesla's technologies can help us win that battle, or war, whatever we want to call it.
Okay, you have to send me your address. I've written a book about World War One, the Flying Aces, and I know you'd appreciate it. I get into Immelman, and the Red Baron, and how they learned how to fly.
Oh, that'd be cool. Yeah, I'll send that to you. Mark, thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Everybody, thank you very much for being on this episode of Quantum Action. Remember to subscribe and tune into the rest of the content we're producing here. And we're here to help you to get to infinity and beyond.